Hi everybody, you're listening to Comics and History, episode number 100, part 5, The Untold Legend of the Batman, concluded. And welcome to the show. I am your host, Brian J. Rygate, and class is back in session as we wrap up our look at the 1980 story, The Untold Legend of the Batman, written by Len Wein, with art by John Byrne and Jim Aparo. There's only a few pages left, which I have to go through. An amazing ending to this excellent three-part story, and in the latter half of this recording I will be giving some long-awaited words of thanks to people who have been important to me in my personal life, but also to people who have been very important in the birth and the ongoing evolution of this podcast. So let's begin. Bruce Wayne has finally figured it out. He has reached a conclusion as to who it is who has been taunting him in recent days. He knows the identity of the person who managed to sneak into the Batcave, take his father's Batman costume, and tear it to shreds. He knows who it is who has written multiple threatening letters addressed to Batman personally, and he knows who it is who has gone so far as to plant explosives in the Batmobile, something which almost resulted in the death of Dick Grayson, aka Robin. So, later that night, Batman returns to the long boarded up, shuttered up Wayne Manor. And this scene must have been a real treat for readers in 1980. Because as I mentioned on a previous installment of the centennial episode of Comics and History, it was all the way back in 1969 that Bruce Wayne made the decision that he and Alfred would close up Wayne Manor and move downtown to the heart of Gotham City. They would live in the penthouse suite in Wayne Tower, and they would build a new Batcave underneath Wayne Tower. This was all in response to Dick Grayson having finally reached adulthood, or young adulthood rather, and making the decision to move on to college. Now, I imagine that in between 1969 and 1980, there must have been at least a couple of stories which took place in Wayne Manor, whether they be flashback stories or Batman just deciding to return to the manor to reflect on something that was going on in his life as Bruce Wayne or as Batman. But to see the manor like this still must have been enjoyable for readers who missed all those stories where Bruce Wayne would sit in the sitting room and talk with Alfred and with Dick. For my part, I really enjoyed the stories in which Bruce and the rest of the family are in Wayne Manor. In some of the best Batman stories, Wayne Manor becomes more than just a building or a mansion. It becomes a character in itself. And of course, one of the first changes that came about in the post-crisis era was that Bruce Wayne was back at Wayne Manor. So, getting back into the story, Bruce Wayne, or rather Batman, opens the front door. He's struck just by how empty the place feels, but at the same time, it's not entirely empty. It's filled with memories, and he can't help but see ghostly images throughout Wayne Manor based on those memories. One memory, which shocks him a little bit at first, is seeing himself as a little boy with his father, Thomas, and young Bruce is carrying his father's medical bag. He's wearing his father's mirrored headband and saying, "You know what I want to be when I grow up, Daddy?" And Thomas humors this and makes a few guesses before young Bruce says, "I want to be a doctor like you, Daddy, because you help people." And that's where Thomas has some nice words for his son. He says, "That's what life is all about, Bruce. It's about helping people, showing our love, our compassion. That's what sets us apart from the beasts of the fields." And I think that line isn't just referring to animals, it's referring to that's what really separates good, decent people from the less desirable elements in our society. And Thomas tells Bruce, "Promise me you'll never forget that." The idea of the need to show love and compassion and to help people. And of course, young Bruce promises, "I won't." I really like that memory because it shows that it's more than the death of the Waynes alone that led Bruce to become a crusader who wanted to help people. It went back even farther. Years before Bruce would make that decision to become a creature of the night. Right from a time he was a little boy, his father was setting him on that path to being a good, decent, helpful person. A less pleasant memory for Batman is, again, seeing his younger self, looking at his parents dressed in their masquerade costumes. Of course, Thomas in his Batman costume. And it's jarring for Batman, given that his father's costume was recently ruined by this mysterious person, but also it was Thomas going to that masquerade as a Batman that set in motion the whole chain of events which led to the death of the Waynes and Bruce going on that dark path towards becoming the Batman. Bruce reflects on the fact that his father, not being there, could not have known how that costume would change his life. But then he has another memory from, I guess, several years ago in which the bat signal is flashing and Alfred has brought Bruce and Dick their Batman and Robin costumes. But Batman is able to shake off all of these memories and he keeps on moving ahead. And as he's moving ahead, he does ask, I respond to those in need without instant hesitation. What about my needs? And what about me? That must have been an interesting line for readers in 1980. Certainly, in a post-crisis era, we've seen more reflection on Bruce Wayne / Batman's part, saying, well, what about me? Where's my just reward? But I don't recall seeing lines like this as much in the pre-crisis era. But of course, Bruce is moving towards that famous grandfather clock, and he turns the hands on the face that caused the grandfather clock to shift aside, revealing the entrance to the original Batcave, which sits, of course, under Wayne Manor. And Batman does not get very deep into the cave, as he finds that the Batcave walls are closing in on him. This is, of course, a security protocol which he would have had in place years ago, and Batman realizes how foolish he's been. If the person who's been haunting him these last few days was able to sneak into the other Batcave underneath Wayne Tower, Batman should well have known that his antagonist would also strike at the original Batcave. And this is where this mysterious antagonist reveals himself. And he is, I would say, in non-corporeal form. He cannot actually exist in solid form because the person who has been taunting and haunting Batman all this time is Bruce Wayne. And Batman responds first by saying, you're not real. You don't exist. To which this spectral-looking Bruce Wayne says, no, if you had your way, I wouldn't exist, would I? Because of you, I've lost my friends, the women I loved, maybe my very sanity. That's why I intend to destroy you, Batman, so that Bruce Wayne can finally start living. Now, certainly, in the post-crisis era, we've had a number of stories where Bruce Wayne / Batman has had an identity crisis. And very often it's come about because Batman has gotten so deep into his crusade, he's pushed himself beyond the bounds that any mortal being can tolerate. And so he loses sight of the fact that he is human. And so he does start to push aside his humanity, and he sees himself as Batman. Part of it also comes from the fact that there have been a number of Batman writers in the last 30 years who prefer to see Batman as the real person and Bruce Wayne as the mask. And my personal contention will always be that both Batman and the Bruce Wayne who appears in public as the spoiled philanthropist billionaire are both the masks, and the real person is a person who was born Bruce Wayne, lost his parents at a very young age, and made a decision while he was still very young to take him on the path in which he would create these two false identities that would allow him to help other people both in the costume and out of the costume. And for me, the best stories are the ones in which the real Bruce Wayne loses sight of who he really is, and he takes comfort in seeing himself as Batman, views Bruce Wayne as this inconvenience that he has to keep up in order to give him some measure of anonymity. But those stories always conclude where Bruce Wayne comes to his senses. He realizes who he really is. And he's got the handle on himself and how he needs to carry out his crusade. So a number of stories, again, in the past 30 years, where Batman and Bruce Wayne have come to a battle of the minds. But in 1980, this scene must have been really surprising for a lot of readers. And I think it's fair to say that Len Wein's writing in this scene has certainly inspired at least a couple of generations of Batman writers. Well, the Batcave walls are continuing to close in, and Batman is beginning to falter. And he says that, maybe this ghostly Bruce Wayne is right. Maybe the Manhunter has overwhelmed the men, and maybe it would be easier for Batman to simply put down his arms, let the walls cave in, crush him, and put him out of his misery. But then we hear a voice call out, "No, that's the coward's way out, and you know it." And this voice surprises Batman. He turns his head aside. He says, "Lord, no, Dad." And here we see Thomas Wayne in full physical form wearing his Batman costume, which has been fully restored. And Thomas says, "You've got to fight it, son. Don't give up. You must